Religion, as defined by Merriam-Webster, is a personal set or institutionalized system of religious attitudes, beliefs, and practices. Some may say religion is a guide to living your best human life, and others may say that it is a strict set of rules, which, if followed, determines your soul's eternal rest. I believe the term religion is just an intimidation to understanding a new way of life and developing a different way of thinking. If we changed religion to relationship, I feel we would mend the divide between various denominations. Modern-day religion are based on pagan beliefs and practices, but most, if not all, of their scriptures do not reflect the actual history of those religions. Whether being persuaded into a religion or forced through genocide, all modern-day religions root to a pagan ritual or god. The Celtic people were a collection of tribes originating in Central Europe that shared the same religious beliefs, traditions, and cultures. It is believed that the Celtic people evolved as early as 1200 BC, but were first documented in the 7th or 8th century. The Celts migrated through Western Europe to countries including Britain, Ireland, France, and Spain. Although the Celts had a written language, it was rarely used. Therefore, their philosophical beliefs and teachings were preserved through oral tradition. The history we do have stems from the Greeks and Romans, where the Celts are referred to as Keltoi by the Greeks and Galli by the Romans, meaning barbarian. These writings from the Greeks and Romans are said to be somewhat biased, as they were written from a warfare viewpoint. Julius Caesar wrote about Druidism and its teachings, but never participated in the community to get a better insight. Within his writings, we do discover the Celtic people practiced Druidry, until it was converted to Christianity in the 7th century. He writes about the highly sophisticated trifold in the Druid community: bards, ovates, and druids. This emphasizes the personal roles of those involved with Druidism. Druidry is a spiritual path that is open to all willing to embrace its teachings. Druidic tradition was passed on verbally, as the written language was rarely used. Therefore, the people who practice Druidry have no sacred text, nor are there a set of beliefs universally agreed upon by all who practice. The religion of Druidry establishes a relationship between yourself, the nature of life, and the yearning you would like to continue to develop within those two things. Ancient Druids were known as the guardians of magical and religious traditions that existed before the development of Christianity. The bardic teachings help nurture the creative identity, the aspect of an individual which they can personify as the singer. Ovate teachings cultivate the healer within our shaman identity, and Druid teachings develop inner wisdom. In ancient Druidism, a bard was a poet or storyteller taught in the bardic colleges. The bards were the keepers of tradition and of the memories of the Celtic tribes. The training to become a bard was intensive, and although there were variations of curricula between countries, it is believed that bards were taught for about 12 years, each having its own level of grades and accomplishments to proceed to the following year. The curriculum for bards consisted of many stories and poems, being repeated until capable of reciting them without fail. The bardic colleges focused on sensory deprivation to enhance the recollection of events through inspiring poetry in absolute darkness. With these teachings, bards were trained to be both masters of record and inspiration, as their purpose is to continue teaching the traditions of their tribes. This is acknowledged by some as the first step to becoming a druid, but it is not at a lower level than a druid themselves. A bard can act as a druid if one is not present in a tribe. After the years of study, a bard must know all 350 stories of their tribe and create poems to teach to future bards. Only then can they be considered a mastress or a mistress. The Ovates were a group of people within Druidism who were known as the healers. They stood to understand the mysteries of life and death, transcend time, and interpret the way of nature. Becoming an Ovate requires as much dedication to all life on earth as it does to death. When becoming an Ovate, you must request entry into the Ovate grade only after completing the conditions required for admittance. These are traditions passed from generations to generations and are not documented thoroughly, as the Celtic people did not record their history in writing. The Ovate grade can be described as transcending the darkness within one's innermost character. Understanding the magic of an Ovate comes after much meditation and self-exploration. digging into your deeper self before you can transform to a new person of power. Many did not complete the levels of unconscious consciousness required to become Ovates, as freedom from their ego can only be obtained by the help of the spiritual warrior, a force that is believed to live inside each and every individual. During this journey, the Ovate is challenged by the spirit of Druidry, asked if they have the courage and honesty to take responsibility for the state of their life, and if they have what it takes to fight for their spiritual freedom. It is believed that your inner spiritual warrior is not present if you are filled with unconscious behaviors, sloppiness, laziness, disrespect, or if you strive to weaken the precious life that you were given. After this transcendence, the Ovate is then introduced to the magical energies of nature, how to construct and utilize their own wands, and they develop their skills of journeying. An Ovate who accomplishes all of these teachings can then ask to experience a little death, where they are touched by death and they die. After the burial, they are welcomed back into new incarnation by their brother and sister druids. Lastly, in this grade is the energy-raising practice of facing your fears, where the Ovate walks on fire. If done correctly, this is believed to release a surge of energy which aids in transformation. Becoming a druid is the last grade of druidism. Although all levels are equally important, to become a druid, some believe that druid must study for over 20 years before claiming their title. Learning the teachings of bards and ovates, a druid is one of the oldest and wisest members of their tribe and can act interchangeably. Druids are seen as advisors to high rulers, judges, teachers, and authority in ritual ceremonies. The status of druid was held in high regard in the community. Those who advised the monarchies were first to speak at official functions. And it was recorded that at the court of Concobar and the king of Ulster, no one was allowed to speak before the druid. As a judge, a druid would enforce the punishment for breaking laws, such as cutting down sacred trees. These laws are known as Brahen's laws, in which every 3 years they are reviewed and revised. Before the onset of Christianity, these laws allowed for divorce under certain circumstances, such as adultery with someone of the same sex, domestic abuse, malicious intent, etc. In Ireland, under the Christian post-Druidic law, divorce became illegal until 1995, even if a spouse was physically abusive. Druids, as teachers, were responsible for teaching all things from general education to philosophies. Many druids taught 2 or 3 students at a time, but some were known to teach upwards of hundreds of students in druid colleges. Many of the early teachings in Britain and Ireland are druidic. Druids contained the extensive knowledge of their tribe, and it was their job to pass it on. They tutored children of kings and queens, and students would be sent to different druids to learn multiple skills. The druids taught the laws of the land, magic, healing, and the correct order of ceremonies. Since the teachings of the ceremonies were done by druids, they also acted as the authority in ritual ceremonies, working closely to make sure all the steps are being followed in each ritual and that ceremonies are done in accordance to tradition. Druidry can be described as an enlightening relationship with the universe through self-discovery. Whether learning the teachings of a bard, ovate, or druid, they all encompass the idea of holism within their community and nature. Passing down poems and stories throughout the centuries gives this religion a mystical sense of reliability. The texts written about Druidry are not from those in the religion, from the individuals on the outskirts of it, working to understand Druidry or diminish it entirely. Christianity was driven from the outcasting of the Druid community. They were persuaded to convert their beliefs to those of Christian influence or were struck with genocide. Many of the Christian saints stem from Celtic gods and goddesses, and their places of praise, such as wells of water, groves of trees, and sacred areas, were made into cathedrals or stricken of its Druidic history and given a new story, which circled around the idea of Christianity. Druidism survived because of its vocal traditions. Although the idea of Druidry was set to be abolished, its teachings were still instilled in its tribe. After a few centuries of dormant teachings, texts on Druidism, brought to life in the 16th century, led European scholars to rediscover their Celtic roots and bring back the teachings of Druidry.